Hey guys, this is the MMA Breakdown, back with my predictions for UFC 194, Aldo versus McGregor. We're here, we've made it. I'm extremely excited for this card. I think it's the most stacked card in UFC history. Incredible main card. All the matchups there are fantastic and more than worthy of being on the main card, and all very high level matchups, and a really strong prelim card as well. So this for me is just the biggest thing ever, bigger than UFC 100, two amazing title fights at the top, and I just cannot wait for it. The only thing that I don't like about UFC 194 are the two events leading up to it, the 2 days before it. I think that is a lot jam-packed into a very small window. I'm sure all the casual fans and a lot of the interest is just going to be on UFC 194, and people probably aren't even aware that there are going to be two cards before that. But for us, the hardcores, that's a lot to take in, and I'm sure I'm going to be tired once UFC 194 comes around. I'd much rather just have this event isolated, have tunnel vision, just take in this big event, not be distracted by those other two, and one of those cards is really bad. The Namajunas Van Zandt card outside of the main event, that's just a bunch of filler. So not a big fan of that, but still UFC 194 is just the best card they've put together in UFC history. Very special, so I can't wait. Follow me on Twitter. My link is in the description. Always live tweet during fights. Come follow me and converse with me on there. And before I get into the predictions for this card, I need to update my picks very quickly for two fights. One on the Namajunas Van Zandt fight card, and then the other one on the Tough 22 finale, Edgar versus Mendes card. Not that anybody cares, but just to get my picks in. Nathan Coy stepping in for Michael Graves against the debuting Danny Roberts. Nathan Coy from Tough 21. He didn't really impress me in the house. He got a decision win where he out-wrestled the guy. He has the wrestling background, seems to be a persistent wrestler, really chases that takedown and is able to get it, but not a super dominant wrestler and doesn't really have much else. And then in his second fight against Vicente Luque, got beat up on the feet and eventually choked out with the Darce. So has some wrestling, but I think he's limited, doesn't really have much else. He's also 37. And didn't strike me as particularly athletic on the show either. But I can't make a pick there because I don't know anything about Danny Roberts, who is making his debut. So the other fight, a far more compelling matchup, Gene Herrera versus Joby Sanchez. Herrera filling in for Justin Scoggins. I think this is a way more exciting fight than the original matchup. But I got to go with Herrera here. I thought he looked incredible against Ray Borg. He seemed to be just as skilled a grappler as Borg. Was on his back for most of the fight, but had a really good defensive guard, was able to retain guard a lot when he was on bottom, and looked like a strong grappler. Ray Borg had just ran through some guys in his fights before that on the ground, getting a Kimura submission over Kalades in his fight before that, and he had a tough time with her. That was really competitive, and Borg, I think, is a dark horse contender at flyweight. So I was really impressed with Herrera even in his loss. And Joby Sanchez just hasn't really struck me as a high-level guy in that division. Lost to Wilson Hayes in his debut. That's a tough order, but still got outclassed, got his back taken standing, dropped him with a head kick, almost finished the fight later in it, but still lost the decision. And then against Tateki Matsuda, I think he dropped him late as well, won the decision, but that fight was kind of close as well. So I think Herrera definitely seemed to be the more highly skilled guy, had a great looking ground game, so got to go with him to win that fight. All right, so now on to UFC 194, starting off with the preliminary card on UFC Fight Pass, and welterweight Court McGee versus Marcio Alexandre Jr. Court McGee coming off of a 2-year layoff here, which does concern me. If this was before that layoff, I would take McGee easily without hesitation. And I'm still taking him here, but that layoff does concern me. But Court McGee just has the far better resume. just in terms of the resume of each guy, this is a complete mismatch. Court McGee, he won a decision over Robert Whittaker, which I think a lot of people forget, but we all know how amazing Whittaker is now. But competed well with Whittaker, stood in front of him and stood his ground, banged it out for 3 rounds, dropped Whittaker late, won the split decision. It was a close fight, but just to go 3 rounds with Whittaker, I think says a lot. And then his fight with Ryan LaFleur, his last fight before his layoff, that was a very competitive fight as well. I thought he easily could have won it. It was razor thin. Was competing well with LaFleur on the feet and scrambled really well too on the ground. He's got good wrestling. He's got great dirty boxing. Marches forward and likes to get in your face, make it ugly and dirty, and that's what I think he's going to do to Alexandre here. Alexandre, the runner-up from Tough Brazil 2, I didn't think he even deserved to get to the finale fight. Thought he lost his semifinal fight against Abreu. But in the finale fight, got out-wrestled by Warley Alves and submitted in the 3rd round. And I thought he looked better and improved against Tim Means. I think dropped him with a head kick at one point, but still lost the decision. And overall, the fight was pretty uneventful. He likes to strike from the outside, use those kicks, use the long striking, but he's not great at it. He's not really dominant. I think he has an advantage in the athleticism department, being the younger guy. But Court McGee is just more experienced, and I think he's going to get it right in his chest, make him exchange in the pocket, and I like McGee to win the decision. So going with Court McGee. Next up, a lightweight, John Makdessi versus Yancy Medeiros. This is a close fight, interesting matchup. John Makdessi, I feel, is slowing down, though. Even in his Shane Campbell fight, which was his first fight after a long layoff, I think almost 2 years. In that fight, before getting the knockout, which was impressive, one-shot knockout, he was eating some leg kicks. He got busted up a bit by Shane Campbell, and then in the Cerrone fight, ate that kick to the jaw, that broke his jaw, and I think he said he was going to consider retirement afterwards. Just seems to me like the guy is slowing down a bit, and his fights that have gone the distance earlier in his career were not that dominant. The fights against Cruikshank and Sam Stout, lost a decision by Anthony Njokuani where he was just kept at bay the entire fight and could never get inside. He has knockout power, but if he can't get that finish early, he doesn't do a great job of closing the distance and getting inside. He has some trouble at range with guys. And Medeiros, who is a more high-volume striker, always throwing unorthodox stuff, and who has finishing power as well. He caught Proctor with the spinning back kick to the body and then finished him off with the guillotine. I think Medeiros, with that high-volume approach, the unorthodox attack, I think he's going to win the decision here. Makdessi has the power to catch him. We saw Medeiros get put out by Poirier in his last fight. But Poirier is a high-level guy, so I don't think that is too much of a discredit to his skills. But I just think Makdessi is kind of on the decline. Medeiros, I think, has more momentum. Makdessi, I think, is a little more of a skilled striker, but Medeiros is more willing to go for it. So I'm going to go with Medeiros here to win the decision. All right, next up, a lightweight, Joe Proctor versus Magomed Mustafaev. Last fight on the Fight Pass card. Joe Proctor, for me, he's had some decent performances. His last win over Justin Edwards was really nice. One of these guys from The Ultimate Fighter that has managed to stick around in the UFC, and he's made a career out of it, but I just don't think he's really been improving at much of any rate at all. His last fight against Justin Edwards, the finish was really impressive, but he was losing every single second of that fight. He was getting outpointed on the feet, getting outstruck, couldn't make anything work, and just at the end of the fight was able to hurt Edwards and get that front choke and choked him unconscious, which you have to give it up for the guy. That's impressive to be able to force victory right at the last second when you're facing defeat. And it was an impressive win, but he's a low output striker. On occasion, he's shown power, like against Justin Salas, but he's low output, and when he's not getting the knockout, his strikes don't seem to be that effective. You know, the Cristiano Marcelo fight wasn't getting much done with his strikes. Has submission skills, but never mixes in his takedowns with the striking. Seems to only want to stand on the feet, and we saw against Medeiros, you know, got hurt to the body and submitted. Mustafaev, he had in his debut against Piotr Hallman, was really aggressive, came out hot right out of the gate, and was pouring it on Hallman. I think Hallman started to come back, but the fight was stopped due to a cut. And just given how aggressive Mustafaev was, how willing he was to go for it, I have to go with him here over Proctor, who just doesn't seem like he's really rounding out his game. You know, he shouldn't be down 3 rounds to Justin Edwards, a guy who has not been consistent since the Ultimate Fighter. You know, just a journeyman, and he wasn't able to do much against him. So, you know, that's not good for Proctor. I think Mustafaev will get it done here. All right, moving on to the Fox Sports 1 prelim card at lightweight, Leonardo Santos versus Kevin Lee. I don't really see any way Kevin Lee can lose this fight. This guy's a beast, and he's really been improving at a high rate. He's super young, too, I believe, only 23. But the guy's built like a bodybuilder, and he loves to get in that clinch, work for the takedown. He's got some big slams, and in his last fight against James Montazeri, he showed off a really good submission game. He was able to drag him down to the ground, get the back immediately, and choke him out. Leonardo Santos, a good jiu-jitsu guy, solid grappler, got a nice submission win over Tony. What's his name? Tony Martin in his last fight, which I didn't expect. But he's been really inconsistent. His fights that have went the distance against Escudero and also Norman Park, you know, those were very uneventful fights where his striking just didn't seem really effective, and you know, he didn't get much done in any of those fights. He couldn't get it to the ground either. So against a super physically strong guy like Lee, I don't think Santos will be able to get it to the ground. Lee's just going to physically outmatch him here. Lee's hands aren't great because he relies on his athleticism and wrestling so much, but they're not too bad either. And I just see Lee beating him up in the clinch, taking him down, and just being too much of a workhorse for Santos. And I think he's just going to outwork him. So definitely going with Kevin Lee here for a dominant decision win at the least. All right, next up at welterweight, Warlley Alves versus Colby Covington. Another matchup where I just think Covington does not have the skills to beat Alves. Covington is a solid wrestler. Finished both of his first 2 UFC fights, but those were against complete cans. Anying Wang and from Tough China, and then Wagner Silva, a complete washout from Tough Brazil, who lost his only fight in the house. He might have won his first fight, I actually can't remember, but I think he did. But anyways, just complete cans. And you know, he's kind of a dominant wrestler against those low-level guys. Got the submission against Silva in the 3rd round, and I think got the TK over Anying Wang. But Warlley Alves, this guy is a destroyer. Still very raw and green, really rounding out his game still. But he's got a great takedown game. And he's got a great guillotine choke, which he finished Marcel Alexandre with to win the tough finale, and then his last fight against Nordine Taleb. And he was taken down by Taleb in that fight. Covington, being a good wrestler, you know, I think has a chance of getting him down, but I don't think he can do that for 3 rounds. Alves is dangerous on the feet too, really athletic. Got a flying knee knockout on Tough. And Colby Covington against Mike Pyle in his last fight, able to get him down for the whole fight, but then in that 3rd round, almost got choked out. So Warlley Alves, with his submission skills, if he does get taken down, I see him doing just fine on the ground. So I'm going to take Alves here to win by submission. Next up at women's strawweight, Tisha Torres versus the late replacement Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger, who's stepping in for Michelle Watterson, and that's disappointing. I thought that was a great matchup. Lybarger, I don't know anything about her, so I can't make a pick here, although I gotta think that it's safe to assume Torres will win this fight, just given her experience on Tough, and just her name, I guess. But she is a solid fighter. I know one of my viewers, Solid Cold, this guy really thinks that Torres is going to be the one to dethrone Jędrzejczyk, which I just don't see. He says that her defense is really good, and that's going to be a problem for Jędrzejczyk. And I do think she is really solid, but I think she's almost too defensively sound to a fault, where she just doesn't let her hands go enough. She's not offensively proactive enough with her striking when she has a clear advantage there over her opponents. Magana, she dropped her in that fight, but just seemed unwilling to really go for the finish, and she was completely outstriking her. Same thing against Angela Hill. She was letting Hill come to her, but had the clear advantage in the striking. Landed some takedowns in that fight, and then her on tough, losing to Carla Esparza, losing to what's her name? Jesus, I can't remember. The Randa Marcos in the first fight. Getting out wrestled. She's a solid fighter. I don't see her winning that title if she does get up there. But she's got good striking. I just don't think she's forceful enough with her game to really compete against the more active strikers in that division. But I would assume she's going to win this fight, but I can't make a pick. All right, next up at bantamweight, Uriah Faber versus Frankie Saenz. I hate this matchup. I am not a fan of this. Uriah Faber, with the very small amount of time he has left in the sport, he needs to be fighting in big-name matchups like his last fight when he fought Frankie Edgar. Why are you going to give him to Frankie Saenz? I understand if Frankie Saenz gets a win, that kind of puts him on the map, but I mean, does it really at this point? I still think people won't even care if Frankie Saenz gets the win here, because if he does get the win, it's going to be by holding him down for 3 rounds and out wrestling him, which I don't think is going to happen. And if Faber wins, so what? But there is a risk of him losing here. Uriah Faber, I've been saying this for his last several fights, but ever since he lost to Barao, he had that incredible win over Michael McDonald in a very busy year where he had 4 fights, and then what seemed to be a very unintelligent decision, decided to fight Barao on 6 weeks' notice or whatever after a very busy year. And he got ran over by Barao, and then after that fight, he just looks like he's been declining ever since. Against Alex Caceres, and I know he got the win there, but you go back and watch that fight, he was struggling on the feet. Francisco Rivera, he was getting outstruck in that first round. I thought he just didn't have an answer and was probably going to lose a decision there if he didn't poke him in the eye. And his fight against Edgar didn't get. I didn't think he got dominated, but still didn't really have an answer for Edgar at all. He just seems to have lost that athleticism that made him really dangerous early in his career, and just does not have the technical striking to fall back on. A lot of his game is power striking, throwing big haymakers, catching guys in scrambles, and if guys aren't willing to wrestle with him, he's just not a high-level striker on the feet. Frankie Saenz, though, solid wrestler, has a good work rate. Against Yuri Alcantara, landed the takedowns and was able to nullify the submission game, won some scrambles. Thought he showed good dirty boxing against Nolan Tickman. I think he has a chance to out-wrestle Faber, outwork him, just because of how Faber's been declining and not looking impressive over his last several fights. But nobody beats Faber at his own game. If Saenz decides to wrestle with him here and scramble with him, I think Faber's going to catch him in a submission. So I still, even given Faber's athletic decline, think he still has the skills to beat a guy like Frankie Saenz, who, by the way, nearly lost a decision in his last fight to Serwan Kakai. And, if he's not good enough to get a dominant victory over Kakai, I think Faber definitely still has the skills to beat him. So going with Faber by submission, but I do think there is a fair chance that Faber loses this. All right, next up, on to the main card. This, like I said, incredible main card, all spectacular matchups, all very high level fights. But starting off at featherweight, Max Holloway versus Jeremy Stephens. Holloway is just the more skilled guy. I think he's going to outclass Stephens. And that's not to say Stephens is a bad striker. He's actually a very good kickboxer, has good power. His knockout over Honey Jason, so great counter striker. Great counter striking, great timing, and he has power. His last fight against Dennis Bermudez, I thought he lost the first round. Got outworked a little bit in the clinch, and I think he got taken down, but then took over on the feet and just had the more accurate striking, the bigger power, puts Bermudez away. And his fight with Cub Swanson, though, if you compare Holloway's fight with Cub Swanson, Stephens' fight with Swanson, you just see the difference in the skill level. Holloway has just become an absolute master at striking from range, keeping guys at bay. The front kicks, the long rangy striking. He's just deadly from out there. He's a GSP when it comes to striking from distance. As dominant from there as GSP was with the wrestling, and he's adding the submission skills when he has guys hurt, finishing them off with a submission. Great at jumping on guys when he has them hurt, and he can also trade in the pocket. We saw that in the Coruscant fight. And against Oliveira, looked like he picked up right where he left off with Swanson, going to the body, using great movement and angles. Holloway has to take Stephens seriously here. Stephens has the power to connect, but Holloway should just have the far higher level striking, especially at range. So definitely like Holloway here. I think he can get the finish, but I think it's more likely wins the decision. All right, next up at welterweight, Demian Maia versus Gunnar Nelson. Demian Maia, I feel he's inconsistent in that, sometimes he fights guys that you really feel like he should put away, and he's had a long history of not being able to put guys away that are far less skilled than him. And recently too, Alexander Yakovlev, he couldn't finish. Ryan LaFleur, even though it was a dominant win, except for the last round. And going back years against Mario Miranda, Jorge Santiago. But then, once in a while, like his fight against Neil Magny, he gets him down, outclasses him on the ground, is able to get the submission with relative ease. But the thing about Demian Maia, and why I'm going to pick Gunnar Nelson here, is because Maia always seems to let his opponent get back in the fight. Against LaFleur, just totally ran out of gas in the last round. I know that was a 5-round fight. This is a 3rd-round fight, but just looked dead. Was falling to his back, had no gas to stand up and fight anymore. Even against Yakovlev, who he was dominating early in the fight, in the 3rd round, Yakovlev was able to get on top of him and mount, I believe, and started to get some shots in. Maia, I think, on the ground, is probably the more technical grappler, higher skilled guy. I think he maybe has the better takedowns. His takedown game has really developed a lot recently against LaFleur, just trying to work for takedowns from all angles, great chain wrestling and using the trip takedowns. That part of his game has really improved. So I think he can get Nelson down early, win some rounds, score some points. On the feet, Nelson, I think, will definitely have the advantage there. Showed power in his last fight against Brandon Thatch and also against Zach Cummins. I also feel like Maia might be able to clinch with Nelson. Nelson got out clinched by Zach Cummins in their fight and was getting roughed up a bit in the clinch and losing the striking battle too early on. And seems tentative early in the fight, doesn't let his hands go. But in that Thatch fight, I thought he fixed everything that went wrong for him in the Story fight. He knew he needed to get to work early with his hands, drop Thatch, and then once it hits the ground, in contrast to Maia, he's not a setup guy. It's speed chess once it gets to the ground. He goes for the kill right away. So I think, like I said, Maia's going to get some takedowns early. I don't think he's going to be a threat at all to him on the feet. But I think in the 3rd round, Maia's just going to slip up, let Nelson get on top, take his back, something, get hurt on the feet, and I think he's gonna create an opportunity. He's gonna be given an opportunity in the third round to win the fight. And a guy as dangerous as Nelson, if he gets your back, gets that body triangle on you, it's over. It's crazy to say, but I got to go with Nelson. I think he's going to get a submission in the third round. We've seen Maia out-grappled against guys like Shields. And Nelson, while he doesn't have the experience or the cage time that Maia does, I don't think he has all the tricks up his sleeve. He's still a very dangerous, highly skilled grappler. And if Maia slips up, Nelson's going to make him pay for it. So I'm going with Nelson, submission, third round. All right, next up in middleweight, Aldo, Jacare Souza versus Yoel Romero. Another really good matchup, but I don't think this is actually going to be too exciting of a fight. I think Souza has a clear-cut path to victory here. Do his usual thing. He's a great game plan guy, and that's the big advantage he's going to have over Yoel Romero. Every time, Jacare, he's going to blitz you on the feet with great speed and power. Throw those bombs to close the distance. Get in on your legs, get you to the ground, and from there, work for the submission. Did that, followed that game plan to a T against Gegard Mousasi. And you just see how skilled and how easily this guy's able to put himself in position to get the submission against Kamosi and show power against Okami. But in contrast to being a game plan guy, Yoel Romero, he's the opposite. He just waits around, sits back, waits for his opportunity, whether it's Stoolgate against Tim Kennedy or, he's good at getting those third round knockouts because he just sits back and he waits. The Machida fight, I thought he seemed like a little more like he was waiting to get that takedown and was able to get it, and from there, knocked him out with the ground and pound. He's a powerful guy. He's a wrestler, but Souza, even though Yoel Romero is the Olympic wrestler, Souza's more of the active wrestler, and he goes for that takedown a lot. Romero doesn't. He's much more content to just sit back on the feet and wait, and then go for the kill late in the fight. So I think Souza, he's just going to outwork Romero here, have him defend that takedown all day and on the ground. Yoel Romero, he's a good grappler, but he's not going to be better than Souza. And I don't know if Souza submits him, but I think he definitely can take him down and control him there for a decision. So got to go with Jacare. All right, on to the title fights. Co-main event for the middleweight belt, Chris Weidman versus Luke Rockhold. Like I said at the top, I think this is probably the most competitive UFC title fight ever. Two insanely skilled guys, and I think it's dead even. I've been back and forth on this. When the matchup was first announced, back then I said I was going with Weidman, and now I'm kind of leaning Rockhold. I know this is going to sound really stupid, but I got to say it. Chris Weidman, and this isn't to say Chris Weidman isn't a skilled fighter, but I think we've seen him get by more on his advantages in fights, either physical or just having the wrestling advantage, more so than having to make real adjustments and having his skills pushed to the limit. And for example, against Anderson Silva, he won that fight because of his game plan. And Silva also making himself very vulnerable to Weidman. Against Lyoto Machida, he got pushed in that fight and did have to make adjustments, contrary to what I just said, but I think he was able to really fall back on his wrestling and just being the physically stronger guy, able to get it to the ground and rough him up with ground and pound. And then his fight against Vitor Belfort, same thing. Early in the fight, he was getting tagged on the feet and was able to get the takedown. From there, moved into mount and just looked like he was a grown man holding down a little boy and pounded out Belfort. And my point is that he's had these advantages, whether they be physical or in his game plan, like against Anderson Silva, or just falling back on his wrestling. And I don't think he can just go to his wrestling against Rockhold. Rockhold is a super dynamic guy. And I think he's proven to be a little more dangerous than Weidman. At least when it hits the ground. Weidman is definitely a great wrestler and has good submissions, but his submission wins were early in his UFC career against not very strong competition. Tom Lawler, Jesse Bongfeld. But what Luke Rockhold did to Tim Boach, that inverted triangle submission, that's high-level slick stuff. And I'm not saying he's going to submit Weidman, but if Weidman takes him down, I think Rockhold is going to give him all he can handle. I think he can reverse Weidman. I think he can, get him in some sticky situations with some submission attempts. Rockhold's not going to have the wrestling that Weidman will, but he's definitely going to be capable enough with the grappling on the ground to make that very competitive and uncomfortable for Weidman there. And not only do I think Rockhold's a more slick grappler, I think he's just physically way stronger than Weidman. But I will say, Weidman, I saw his shadow boxing video, and he's looking jacked. He's got those big old arms. He's looking leaner than ever. I saw the article that said, he skipped Thanksgiving. But he's looking lean and strong, but still, and it's mostly, I'm saying this because of the Machida fight. Weidman, he got beat up a little bit on the feet in that fight. He got bloodied up. He faded a little bit. And even when he did get Machida to the ground, he was able to get off some ground and pound. He wasn't able to stop the fight, and Machida was still able to get back up. And you look at what Rockhold did to Machida. Dropped him on the feet. It was kind of a weird shot. It looked like a grazing shot and looked like Machida might have tripped over himself. But once it got to the ground and Rockhold got on top, it was complete domination. His ground and pound was far more brutal than Weidman's. He never let Machida get back up. He took his back and he finished him. And that was a way more dominant performance than what Weidman did against Machida, who was really pushed, had to go 5 rounds, got hurt on the feet. His cardio faded a bit. I really think people are in for a surprise here. And once it hits the ground, I just think, Weidman's a good grappler. He's got good submissions, has the better wrestling, but Rockhold, he's got this really slick grappling game. And I just think he's going to be more of a physical force than Weidman, honestly. He doesn't look it, but he has really great functional strength. I mean, once it gets to the ground, the fight's over. I'm not saying here, but against Bisping, hurt him with the head kick and finished him with that one-arm guillotine immediately. I think the guy is he gets the finish more easily than Weidman does once it hits the ground. One other area I think Weidman will have the advantage in is on the feet with the boxing. Rockhold, we haven't seen much of his hands. He's a great kicker, very dangerous with his kicks, and that's where he does all his damage. The Philippou fight and the Bisping fight, dropping him with the head kick. He really needs that space, and Weidman is good pressure boxing, moves forward, takes that space away, and Weidman's a great game plan guy too. I think Weidman can win rounds there, but other than the Anderson Silva fight, Weidman has never really proven to be a knockout striker. So even if he can outbox Rockhold, I don't see him hurting him or knocking him out. So I think eventually Rockhold, that fight will get to the ground somehow. And another fight that shows that Rockhold is good at. Even if he gets taken down, he holds his own on the ground. It's the Tim Kennedy fight in Strikeforce where he was taken down, but he would reverse mid takedown, or he would immediately get to the defensive guard once it hit the ground. I'm taking Rockhold here. I don't think he finishes Weidman. I think we're going to see some violent ground and pound though if he gets on top. I think Rockhold's going to be able to out grapple Weidman, honestly. Get his back or get on top, and I don't think Weidman is ready for that, honestly. Strong wrestler, but the grappling and the strength, I think Rockhold is better there. So I'm going with Rockhold. Weidman is an elite fighter. I'm not trying to discredit him. Could definitely win the decision, win with the wrestling, win with the boxing. But I really like what we've seen from Rockhold on the ground and that strength he showed against Machida. I got to go with Rockhold. All right, now on to the main event at featherweight. Jose Aldo versus Conor McGregor for the belt. I've only picked McGregor, sadly, to win 2 times since he's been in the UFC. And that was since I've been doing videos. And that was from his second fight against Max Holloway. The only times that I picked McGregor to win were against Diego Brandao and then his fight against Dennis Seaver. All his other fights I've picked against him. And you can go back and watch my video from 189 when this fight was originally supposed to take place. And there I picked Aldo to win a decision. You can go watch that video, hear my reasoning for that. But I'm going to take McGregor in this fight, and I think people have to realize that Aldo cannot win a decision here. When Aldo wins decisions like against Ricardo Lamas, or going back years before that, Kenny Florian, even the Frankie Edgar fight, or the Korean Zombie fight, which was not a decision win, but almost was. He's very, very laid back, and he just goes on cruise control. Does not want to put himself in harm's way. Doesn't want to do more than he has to win. He sticks and moves. He lands some shots here and there. He's not very proactive with his offense. He doesn't really force the action. And I think he has zero chance of winning a decision in that way against McGregor. You can point to the second Chad Mendes fight and say, well, Aldo hurt him there, and that was a back and forth fight for 5 rounds. But McGregor is a far more skilled and has a far wider array, a far more diverse arsenal of strikes than Chad Mendes. And if Aldo goes in there trying to bang it out in the pocket, he's going to have to take a ton of damage from McGregor to do that, especially over the course of the entire fight. And the thing about McGregor is that he's not a one-shot knockout guy, but he hurts you badly with one shot. And it's not even, it's not just that he wins by volume, but he wins by accumulated strikes that each have a very damaging impact on you. The fight against Mendes, those body shots he landed early in the fight hurt Mendes badly and really took a toll later. And the same thing against Seaver. He gets to him. He gets to you early, lands his shots, finds the openings, and you can see the guys just slowly start to fall apart with each shot that lands. And I think that is what's going to happen here against Aldo. McGregor's going to, land those shots early. I don't think it's going to be wild. They're going to just go crazy in the middle of the cage. But I think McGregor's going to land those shots. And by the 4th or 5th round, I think Aldo's going to have taken enough damage, and given his history of fading late in fights, that's where he's going to fall apart. McGregor's going to take over. So where do I think Aldo can win? Well, if he can't win a decision, can he finish McGregor? Well, I don't think it's likely, but maybe. Aldo has insane athleticism and insane instincts, almost animal-like when he wants to use them. There was a moment in the Chad Mendes fight, the second one, where Aldo, I think it was after Mendes landed the groin kick, and they halted the action and they reset, and Aldo just was angry and looked like he let that take him over. Through Mendes. They ended up on the ground. I'm not sure how, if he took him down or dropped him. They ended up on the ground, and there was a sequence that was like a couple seconds where Aldo moved a mount, and he fired off several big ground and pound shots and looked like he was going to finish Mendes right there. He was just super fast about it, and he has these animal-like instincts. And if he does that to McGregor, I think he might have the speed for one shot at throwing everything he has at McGregor and putting him away. Now, I don't think that's likely. We haven't really seen McGregor trade in the pocket. He likes the open space and the distance. So I think Aldo has a chance to do that, but that seems unlikely to me. I think Aldo, he's probably going to try to hurt McGregor, do that early, throw everything at him, and McGregor's not going to go down. And then, this fight's going to have to play out over several rounds. And, Aldo, I think with the leg kicks can do some damage. McGregor ate some leg kicks from Seaver. I think McGregor can be taken down. Seaver briefly got him down. I mean, it didn't mean anything. McGregor got right back up. And Aldo, he does have the takedown, but it's just not in his game to take guys down over and over again and hold them down. But on the feet, if Aldo was getting dropped by Chad Mendes and he was neck and neck with him for 5 rounds, McGregor is a lot sneakier than that. And he's a lot more sneaky than that. He's a lot more defensively sound and has way better movement than a guy like Mendes did. And I don't see him taking the kind of damage that Mendes did if they trade for several rounds. And I just think those shots will accumulate. The damage done by those shots, he will hurt Aldo, land shots that will hurt Aldo later in the fight, and he will take over. Aldo will slowly start to crumble, and McGregor will be the champion. I'm finally going with McGregor. So McGregor by TKO, I'll say 4th round. Yeah. All right, guys. Those are my predictions for UFC 194, Aldo versus McGregor. Hope you like them. Let me know your thoughts on any of these fights, if you agree or disagree with me. A bit of a long video, but we had to allow for that this time. A very special card. Had to get my thoughts out there. If you haven't done so, check out my videos for Namajunas versus Van Zandt and the Edgar versus Mendes fight night. And I'll be back very soon with my predictions for the UFC on Fox, Cerrone versus Dos Anjos fight night. Thank you guys. Take care, and I will see you next time. Bye.